want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandplex here, back with a new Shadowverse 2 video. For today's video, I want to go really in-depth between the differences that I have found between the way that I play Roach and the style of Roach that's played essentially everywhere else with every other content creator that I've seen. More specifically, Dion on YouTube. This Japanese Shadowverse 2 streamer is probably the best forest streamer that I've seen on the site. There might be another one that's better, that's like way less viewers, but this guy shows up when I go to bed and when I wake up, so I just watch him to wind down or wake up in the morning, and he's taught me a lot about how to play the game. But of course, since I watch him and we play essentially, like, ironically, fundamentally different decks, I've seen a lot of differences that I can and can't apply to my own deck. And I've also noticed a lot of things that are different between my plays and his plays. So for example, like plays that he would do that I would never have a chance to do, or plays that I do that wouldn't be optimized for him because he has a different goal for the deck. So before we get into this, I want to talk about the core forest cards just to really highlight the core of the deck no matter what you're playing. And this is important because in many cases, the goal of both styles is the same. You're trying to chip your opponent down or get them to an acceptable lethal range and then pop them in that lethal range. And sometimes you'll need to stall the game out, you'll need to clear the board, you'll need to draw a lot, and all that is pretty much encapsulated in the same package. I'll just name all the cards really quick. It's going to be 3 Maze, 3 Good Fairies, 3 Bug Alerts, 3 Convocations, 3 Fairy Tamers, 3 Lilies, 3 Lemon Karens, 3 Roaches, 3 Goblet Staves, 3 Glades, 3 Livias, and 3 Bales, or rather 2 Olivias and 3 Bales. Now, the reason why these 35 cards are very, very set in stone is because they essentially do everything you need for Forest to get it off the ground. The only 3 cards that are even somewhat flexible are going to be the 3rd Goblet Staff and the 2 Olivias. The 3rd Goblet Staff, in my opinion, is only barely flexible for my way of playing the game, which is the Aria-oriented one, because you are less reliant on Roach bounces, and since you have a few more expensive cards in your deck, you can actually you actually don't want to draw as much or have Goblet Staff as much as in your hand, and you're already relying so much on the Glade, Lily, Olivia draw that sometimes not having that Goblet Staff as fast as possible is a little less punishing than you expect it to be. Everything else is going to be the exact same for every deck, unless you're hyper-optimizing for a very specific line for Forest. And if you've studied the deck enough and you've practiced the deck list that you have enough to get to that point, then bravo, that's pretty cool. So I'm going to talk about Dion's style, which is, again, the more popular style that's going to be showing up on ladder, on streams. I guess this is more of a video for myself to prove to me that, or to rationalize to myself that the way I play is totally fine as well. But I'll explain the currently popular style first, just because that's what more people care about. So the Carbuncle package is essentially any deck that revolves or requires, not revolves or requires, but essentially it focuses on the fact that you have Carbuncles in your deck to super evolve so you can gain 3 power points or 3 play points when you play it, which really gives you usually at least 4 extra damage because you play 2 extra cards through the Baby Carbuncle and an extra 1 mana cost since it regenerates 3 play points. And then it also gives you 1 extra damage from attacking. So very often, Baby Carbuncle is at least 5 extra damage that Roach wouldn't have gotten otherwise. The main thing with Baby Carbuncle is that even though I have Aria in this package, just keep in mind that everything outside the Carbuncles is really optional. You could play 2 Carbuncles, but if you're committing to the combo, you really want 3 just so you can maximize the odds of you drawing it. Now, these other cards are essentially all things that you can play to support the Carbuncle. With 3 extra Carbuncles, you only have 2 slots available to play extra cards. So the main, I guess, like power points that I've seen people play around are going to be 2 Fays for some better early / mid-game cheese, where you like try and end a game at turn 5 with like a double Fairy Fae combo at turn 4, just to like ruin somebody's life, usually Rune player. I've seen Wild Profusion and Elder Sagebrush, which are essentially the same tool against, but like under different labels. They're essentially just meant to be very flood heavy decks, such as Dragon, specifically Face Dragon, and Sword. Now, I don't like these 2 options because they don't feel great against many other lines, I guess, in the game. So like to me at least, it sucks against Runecraft, it sucks against Abyss, it sucks against Haven, it sucks against both of these cards, suck against a lot of other crafts, and they're only decent against the crafts they're built for. I will admit that there are definitely some highs you can achieve with Wild Profusion and Elder Sagebrush, but those highs are so rare for diluting your deck with 2 cards that you can't really get value of otherwise generically. Aaron is going to be more of a pair with Aria. The Aaron plus Aria Tekken was really popular like a week ago, but I think it's fallen out of favor a lot as more Force players have gotten better. Aaron in particular is a card that I think it's a very low value card in the Force combo deck, but because it feels so powerful, you execute something and you heal and get a taunt and your opponent to deal with it. Since it did so much, it felt very good for a while, but it doesn't really advance your gameplay. The best it does is that it stalls 1 turn so you can draw 1 card, and maybe she lives and swings once, which is very rare. And then Working Grasshopper is going to be more of an interesting tech card where you're playing it just as an extra tutor, if you know what that term is. Essentially, you're searching just for the Roach. And you can even play it just as a 1 combo where you can just draw like a good fairy out of the deck earlier so it doesn't brick you later on. It's a card that's really slow, and this meta right now is really fast, so I wouldn't recommend it. But if you have been traumatized by not drawing Roach in the top half of your deck multiple games in a row, I wouldn't blame you for putting Working Grasshopper into the Carbuncle package because you need the Roach combo to win the game. Now, I'll just put this here and I'll probably just rehash it later on after I talk about the Aria package. But you have to realize that the Carbuncle package is very, very dependent on killing your opponent as soon as possible. This deck has a tendency to kind of like have one laser focused objective, and that's to one-shot the opponent. Now, you can't really one-shot many opponents unless you have multiple 0 costs. So what you'll do a lot with the Carbuncle package, also I'll try and find gameplay to record, but if there's no gameplay on here, then you can just go watch Diane's VODs or his streams. I'll link his channel down below so you can look at it yourself after I talk about it. But what he does is that he'll always try and find a way to generate 0 cost whenever possible. And the main 0 cost generator at this point in the game's lifespan is going to be Cairn. Whether that's going to be bouncing Cairn with extra baby carbuncles or bouncing Cairn with a bug alert, he will always find a way to fit a Cairn cast, especially if he already has a Godwood on the field or Roaches in the hand, because every 0 cost adds 2 damage to your final combo through double Roach. So turns 4 through 6 will be the main timings where you have a good time to produce more 0 cost with Cairn. Obviously, Bill also exists at 0 cost, but that's less of a planning thing and more of a universal thing that all variations of Force will ever do. Now, the other thing that is a bit more applicable for both styles, but even more for the Carbuncle package, is that you want to look for moments where you can simultaneously hit your opponent with a earlier Roach while clearing a minion with the subsequent Bug Alert. And if you can burn a few 0 costs early to do this, if it just happens to be, I guess, like on the way to clearing your opponent's board, then you should always look for a way to do this Bug Alert Roach interaction a bit before your actual lethal turn. And this is really important with the Carbuncle one because Carbuncle again has a much larger reach than the style I play. So even dealing like 3 extra damage with a Roach on turn 6 can be really massive because that 3 damage drops your opponent down to 17, and now suddenly they're gonna die because you brought them down to 17, which is actually reachable with a few Carbuncle combos that exist on turn 8 or even 7. So again, you want to watch Diane's stream for this because I am not someone who plays this style, but he really tries to optimize for the combo turns before his actual lethal because he knows that this entire deck revolves around one win condition, and that win condition is some nonsense involved with Roaches and Carbuncle. Now, onto my deck. My deck is going to be something that's a bit more, I guess, traditional, and you can see that the options are a lot smaller. So with Aria, I don't consider it an Aria package until you have at least 2 Arias, because the moment you commit to 2 Arias, that means you really want to draw Aria, because having 2 Arias in hand feels really, really bad. So if you're risking the fact that you can have 2 Arias in hand, your payoff for Aria better be really good. So that's why I have 3 Fays and then 2 Capricious Sprites. I will argue that a singular Baby Carbuncle is maybe good enough to run in this deck because you can find a few high roll scenarios with it. So in this case, what I would do is I would take out the Capricious Sprites, put back in a Goblet Staff, and then put the Baby Carbuncle into the deck, is what I do if I want to play Baby Carbuncle. The reason why I prefer Capricious Sprite over Baby Carbuncle in this deck is just because it's a lot more stable and consistent of a play, unless it comes to purely killing your opponent. And what this means is essentially is that if I have a board that I need to clear and I don't have a Glade in hand because I was not lucky enough to get a Glade, or I don't have a Lily or don't have a May, then Capricious Sprite is actually fairly okay as like a turn 5 play, because what happens is that you play Capricious Sprite, you evo her, and then she generates an extra fairy, and you can also play 2 fairies that she generated. So she goes from a 2/2 essentially, so when you evo her, she becomes a 7/7 for 5 mana to clear the board with, which has saved my hide on a rather numerous amount of occasions. And she also, if you don't have to play those 2 fairies, that ends up being more value for your Arias later. So the other reason why I have 3 Fays, or I don't know, I don't want to say the other, but the reason why I have 3 Fays is because since you don't have as much late game popping power as the Carbuncle package does, you do ironically rely on getting your early tempo on a lot more often, and that usually involves playing double fairy or fairy convocation into Fae on turn 4, which can often lead to opponents just surrendering like the turn after, which can really accelerate your RP gain ironically, because the game is so fast that you can just queue again. And if you're on a good streak with unlucky opponents, unlucky you can have like 5 games in the time it takes a Haven Craft player to play a single game, which is kind of insane for climbing when you think about it. And the reason why 3 Fades is not as bad for 2 Arias is because when you're playing with sprites, or when you're playing with fairies rather, those late game Fays actually end up being really valuable, especially if you don't draw Roach, because since all of your fairies have Storm, you can double, triple, and sometimes even quadruple their damage output with Fey bounces, and that ends up meaning that you can win games that the Carbuncle package couldn't win because they never drew Roach. I mean, in the same seat, you guys both didn't draw Roach, except you actually have damage to push because you have Aria crest on and you were able to close out the game. And the main thing is that you can imagine the Aria package as more of a board-focused build, because you do want to often go for face damage, and you do have to think about you have to weigh the risks of letting certain units live on the enemy's board so they can read out that face damage, because you lack that extra 4, 5, 6 damage reach that the Carbuncle package has. The Carbuncle package, again, can opt to take a bit more passive turns where you play Goblet Staff earlier and you don't clear your opponent's board, where you go for a Cairn instead of like a Lily play because you want the extra 0 cost, where they pass the turn early and they mulligan more passively because they are allowed to do that. With the Aria package, you do often want to mulligan for more aggressive plays, or if it's a quote-unquote bad matchup like Sword, you will do something similar to the Carbuncle package, where you just settle for like a Glade so you don't auto lose to a, let's say, a Zirconia on turn 4, or you just keep like a Lily early on so they can have some presence on the board to clear their 1/2s or 2/1s. So yeah, again, I'll try and have some gameplay on the screen as I talk, and if I didn't and you got this far, I'm super sorry for that. But I think these are really interesting decks because they both represent a really, while they do have the same end goal, the way they interact with their opponent is vastly different, because one involves your own planning and your own patience and your own setup, which is Carbuncle, and the other one involves trying to figure out what your opponent has and how to interact with their board the best to maximize your damage output and set up a more quote-unquote traditional kill that is Carbuncle-less. So hopefully this can kind of convince you guys to come to my side if you are not as good as calculating the massive Carbuncle strings as Dion is. If you want to look at my current deck, I think I do have it right here. I don't know if I changed anything since I last made a video, but yeah. I think both decks, I mean, obviously the Carbuncle one's significantly more popular than the way I play is, but I guess if it works out for me, then it works out for me. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I appreciate it always. Have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye bye.